Well, by now, probably many of you have seen the Disney video of the transvestite welcoming little girls to their day out at Bibbidi Bobbidi Boutique in Disney World. It's one of the most popular experiences at Disney World. It gives kids the opportunity to dress up for a day like their favorite Disney characters and live out their dreams. It fills their minds and their hearts with imagination and everything good about being a kid. So Nick starts out by saying, "My name is Nick, and I'm one of the fairy godmother apprentices here to shop you around and make all your selections for the day." It's interesting, if anywhere, Disney represents Main Street America. Everything good about our country, parades and characters and dreams and hopes and imagination for our kids. But Nick is a sign of how far and how quickly we've moved from what was once personal and private between two adults to a movement. Personal preferences to a cultural perversion. And that's a bad sign. We've traded in family and God and ordained sexual relationships and roles for mass acceptance and celebration of that which is abnormal and ungodly. It is a sled on a slippery slope. It starts slow, it gains momentum, it gets faster and faster and faster, and then we can't stop it. It's what happens when anomalies of morality become normalities, become the norm. It's really when we become the creator. And what really concerns me about this is the passage from Matthew 18:6. Jesus wrote some chilling words in Matthew 18:6. He said, "But whoever causes one of these little children who believe in me to sin, it would be better for him to have a great millstone fastened around his neck and to be drowned in the depths of the sea." Paraphrase, Nick, don't mess with little children. Not that we aren't all broken, fallen people with sinful behavior in our lives. We are. And not that we don't want to help throw grace at marginalized people. We do. Yet Jesus is saying here in very powerful words that when we encourage broken, sinful behavior as a norm and celebrate that behavior, when fallenness becomes acceptable, we're in big trouble. I mean, why don't we have adultery month or smash and grab month or cheat the IRS month? Because it's not wise, it's not healthy, it's not good, it's not right. Something's broken, something's wrong, and you know it, and so do I. What was once unacceptable is now celebrated. So how did we get here? We've talked in these last 4 or 5 weeks about Bud Light, about Pride Month. Interestingly, the colors of the rainbow, God's sign of a promise to Noah of forgiveness, are the colors of Pride Month. We've talked about atheism. We've talked about Mr. Darwin and how all of these things lead to the sickness that we're facing in our culture today. That they all lead and point to what I call moral relativism. This is what I want to get at in the midst of this message, in the heart of this message today. I want you to understand where we are and why. Moral relativism. I went to a baseball game this week, 13 innings. The stands were packed, and it was a great summer evening, almost having back in time, the way things used to be. Question, how would you like to play a baseball game without bases, without a fair or foul line, without a home plate, without a strike zone, without a scoreboard, without rules? I mean, what if every player made up his own game and ran around in circles? Who would buy tickets to that kind of game? It would be utter chaos. And amongst the players, there would be division, anger, alienation, and lots of empty seats. Well, what if everyone in our culture made up their own rules? I mean, it would be crazy, wouldn't it? And there'd be anger and bitterness, and we'd be divided and splintered, and everyone would do what was right in their own mind and in their own hearts. You see, we live in the great age of moral relativism, the belief that a moral right or wrong is a subjective opinion of each and every individual person. And that moral right or wrong cannot be judged outside of that person. So I get to do and act and behave and believe whatever I want. I get to establish my own rules. I get to live in my own private world of my own desires, and you have to accept it and like it. Moral relativism. The theory that there is no absolute objective moral right or wrong. Therefore, we ought to tolerate the behavior of others, even when we disagree with them and cause harm to our culture and to our lives. Moral relativism, our attempt to justify our behavior without any absolute values, without any absolute being, without a God. It's our attempt to give ourselves permission to do or act or believe or behave however we want, no matter what. Now, the problem with that kind of thinking is not only does it deny the existence of God and deny the existence of absolutes, but it leads to total chaos and anger and division between people. A division so great that we can't even talk about it around the family dinner table anymore. The existence of God is not an opinion. Either God exists or he doesn't. It can't be both, that he exists and he doesn't. It has to be one or the other. That's why in these messages, I've been asking the question of origins. Where did the original stuff of the universe come from in the first place, in which there's no real intelligent answer other than an intelligent creator? We've asked the question of design. How do we account for the complexity of the designs of the universe, of DNA, of the human eye, of the ends of the universe, random chance, or an intelligent designer God? And I want to ask the question of morality. Is there an ultimate right or wrong? Is there a God who has established absolute right or wrongs in our culture and our world? You see, when we deny the existence of God, we get lost. There's utter chaos. The Bible says everyone does what's right in their own eyes. Judges 21:25. In those days, there was no king in Israel. Everyone did what was right in his own eyes. There was no king, no sovereign, no one over and above the people to establish the rules and to tell them how to live and act and behave and think and do. Netflix had a documentary called Social Dilemma. It's about a computer scientist, a tech moralist by the name of Tristan Harris, who asks the question, if we don't agree on what is true or that there is such a thing as truth, we're toast. This is the problem beneath other problems, because if we don't agree on what's true, then we can't navigate out of any of our problems. Dostoevsky wrote in The Brothers Karamazov, if there is no God, then all things are permissible. Dostoevsky is saying, if there is no absolute being who reveals absolute truth, then there is no absolute foundation for morality. And if there is no morality, then all things are permitted. There are no rules. There is no ultimate absolute truth. There is no ultimate absolute God. That's why morals and values and truth must come from the God who is there and exists. If not, culture becomes a battleground for who gets to decide what is right or wrong. And we're all left to fight it out on our own. It's sort of our own moral survival of the fittest test. But the good news is there's a God, and this God has revealed himself, and he's revealed moral absolutes, a moral code good for all people at all times, in all places. I've shared before the discussion I had with a woman who said, you Christians are so dogmatic, you believe in absolutes, that there are rights and wrongs. You're so judgmental, so condescending, so arrogant, so unloving. And that's when I asked her, so are you saying that it's wrong to say that there are rights and wrongs? Are you saying that it's absolutely true that there are no absolutes? Did you just make the statement that you're being dogmatic about me being dogmatic? See, we can't get away from absolutes or morals or values or rights and wrongs. We can't even speak. It's gibberish if we say there is no right or wrong. That's a right or wrong statement. This kind of thinking says, ultimately, and what's happening with our culture today, it says, if I think that truth comes from within, it's a subjective truth source, and if I think it must be true for me, then it must be true. And if it is true for me, it must be true for you. And if it's not true for you, then I have every right to be angry and mean-spirited because you refuse to believe my truth, even though there is no absolute truth. And this kind of statement is said by people who don't believe in a right or wrong. And my experience is they don't believe in a right or wrong or absolutes until something bad happens to them, until their first mugging or something stolen, or their kids are mistreated. And then it's all of a sudden, well, that's not fair, and that's not right, and they want to appeal to a higher value, to an absolute. I mean, if someone had a shotgun and they held it to your head and you didn't believe in rights or wrongs or moral absolutes, and they were going to shoot you for no reason whatsoever, wouldn't you want to appeal to a higher standard, an absolute? Wouldn't you want to say, this is wrong to kill me for no reason? You see, ultimately, any attempt to avoid absolutes is an attempt to get rid of God. Why? Why do we want to get rid of God? So that we can call evil good. So that we can do what we want with no rules or no boundaries. Now, the problem with that kind of thinking is if we admit that there is no absolute being and morality is relative, then we're left in a world of our own to slug it out one with each other. So, if we're slugging it out in a world of moral relativity with no absolutes, no moral absolutes, I have a question for you. How do you explain a universal code of moral conduct that seems to exist in the universe and in our worlds? How do you account for the fact that worldwide there is this universal sense of justice, of right and wrong? Why is it that in every culture, everywhere, people value truth-telling over deceit, kindness over violence, loyalty over backstabbing? Why is it wrong to kill a 5-year-old for fun and throw that baby into a dumpster? Why do kids shoot kids? Why do cultures denounce oppression and rape and murder? I mean, where does a worldwide sense of right and wrong come from? Where does it get our world a sense of justice and fair play? Where does everybody get this sense of rightness? Now, and of course, there are some anomalies, but I'm talking about the world in general. Now, anthropologists have been saying for centuries that it's absolutely astounding and amazing and incredible to them how much consistency there has been throughout human history with regard to the ethical sense of right and wrong, of a moral code sewn into the very fabric and lives of every human being. Where did that universal moral code come from? Who put it there? Random chance or a moral, intelligent creator? C.S. Lewis wrote in Mere Christianity, human beings are all created in the image of God, and therefore have at their core a sense of moral oughtness. We don't always live up to it, but it's there. Lewis is saying that as human beings created by God in his image, we have this moral code stamped on our hearts and minds. It's a universal code of right and wrong. It's in God's image. It's in God within himself. It's written on our hearts by God. It is real. It's undeniable. All people know right and wrong. Romans 2:14, Paul writes, when the Gentiles, who do not have the law, do by nature things required by the law, they are a law for themselves, even though they do not have the law. They show that the requirements of the law are written on their hearts, their consciences also bearing witness, and their thoughts sometimes accusing them, and at other times even defending them. Calvin called this the sensus divinitatis. He is saying that God wrote a sense of the divine in every single human being's heart. It's undeniable, a sense of right and wrong. When the foreign nations said, why are you judging us rather than Israel? They have the law and we don't. God said, you also have the law. It's written on your hearts. You know what's right and wrong. All people know what's right or wrong. Nick knows what's right or wrong. When we take our Luther trips, and man, if you can sign up for one of those, I encourage you to go. It is a powerful experience. We spend time at Buchenwald, the concentration camp, the internment of these innocent people, not only Jews, but from Poland and Russia and all of Eastern Europe. And I remember one woman saying when she visited back there, she said, they asked her what she remembered. She said, well, there was no grass here. And they said, well, why is that what you remember? And she said, because if there was grass, we would have eaten it. That's how hungry and starving we were. I mean, if we took millions and millions of people from all over the world and they would walk through Buchenwald, they would, almost without exception, all condemn the actions there. They would reflect the same moral code. We don't always live up to it, but we all know what's right and what's wrong. This is God engineered. It's designed by God, the sense of right or wrong. It's written into our DNA, into our conscience, our minds, and our hearts. Every human being knows when we violate God's code. And when we do, it's in big trouble, especially when we start indoctrinating our kids. This kind of thinking is a long way from who God is and how God created us and why he made us and how he wanted us to live. You see, I believe that every human being needs 5 core values and moral codes in their lives: a truth to believe in, the Holy Scriptures, a faith to rely on, salvation in Jesus Christ, a hope to hang on to, and that's our faith in Jesus when we get in problems or in trouble, which we do, which we will, a community to belong to, they'll support us, our little platoon in life, and a calling to live out. Our calling to share the gospel, to tell people the good news, the great story, to tell everybody. Everybody deserves the right to hear the real story about Jesus Christ. This is our purpose, our mission, our calling to live out. It's only when we have these things involved in our lives that we get life right rather than getting it wrong. Our world's getting it wrong right now. It's living in a world of moral relativism. Main Street Disneyland is a long, long way away. Will you pray with me that we can recover our traditional, God-given, built-in, written into our own hearts and minds, moral code? It is the only answer to our culture and our lives, your kids and mine.